Welcome, everyone. We're excited to have you join us. I know others are just now joining in. Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Whitener with Bridge Innovate, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all today to another segment of our Inspire series, Multiplying Leaders, How the Best Leaders Create Leaders. It's going to be an exciting session today. So as you're joining in, welcome to our webinar series. And we'd like to ask you to say hello by going to the chat, putting in your name and your organization, and let us know who's here today. So throughout today's session, we'll be using chat. I know that our guest speaker, Blake, has a number of interactive activities for us today, but it'd be great if you knew where the chat was, if you go in and say hello, introduce your name and your organization, and I'll say, hi, it's Jenny with Bridge. So you guys know that I'm there. Let's see who else can join me in the chat. Great, I can see. Great, thanks. There's great. Maurice is there. The Salon Professional Academy is there. Austin, thank you. Chad, great. Lindsay's there. Thank you so much. And Tanya, welcome everyone. I'm so glad. Mary, thanks for being there with us. Sean's on board. Thanks so much. And Shelly, excellent. Great. Tyler, thanks so much, all of you, for joining us today. It's going to be an exciting session. So without further ado, let's get going. It's my pleasure to introduce you today, our guest speaker. It's a part of our Inspire series brought to you by Bridge Innovate. Let's continue on, Luke. I want to get right to giving Blake the microphone. Please join me in welcoming Blake Bozarth. He's the founder and CEO of CoThryve. It is so exciting that Blake is with us today. He comes to us with an accolade of experience behind him. Not only is he the CEO and founder of CoThryve, a very successful leadership development company, but he's also known around the globe for his host of Leadership on Purpose, an award-winning podcast series. So he is a great guest for us to have today. He brings with us not only extraordinary knowledge in leadership development, but Blake has actually lived it. He has over 10 years, almost 10 years of experience with Unum, a $13 billion financial services company, holding many leadership positions with them, a number of other lead roles with organizations like Global Real Estate Services, like Strategic Growth. He's also involved in being a contributing member with Business Journal's Leadership Trust. And he's a Covenant College graduate, which we love to hear and hear from Covenant College. They're an extraordinary organization. So we're thrilled to have Blake with us today. So without further ado, I'll hand it off to him and let him talk to us about multiplying leaders.
Thank you, Jenny. I am super excited to be on the series today. And that was one heck of an introduction. I appreciate that. I will start sharing some screen here. Give me a thumbs up, Jenny, if that is coming through right. Sweet. We're talking about how to be a leader that multiplies today, a leader who multiplies. Let's get the pronoun right. And my intention for this is I would love for this, just to be straight up with you, I would love for this to be one of the most impactful 30-minute sessions that you've had all year. I'm sure you've had some great sessions, some great learning and development. I want this to be one of the most impactful, so I want to work hard to do that for you. I'm going to share some insights, going to share a visual tool today that I hope can stick with you and that you can look back on as a compass of sorts for your leadership. This tool has really transformed the way that I lead, and I hope it can do the same for you. So do me a favor, if you will, as we're going through this, if there's a big idea that really strikes you, jot it down in some notes, whether you're doing that on the computer or with the old-fashioned paper and pen. Because our goal here is to share some ideas, share some concepts that drive action, that drive growth. And we're going to have a chance, hopefully at the very end, to give you a minute to be able to put in the chat what are some ahas for you or some things that you want to take away. Maybe it's just one thing, two things that you want to take away for your own leadership. Okay, without further ado, a leader who multiplies. Let's get into it. Our agenda, we'll talk about multiplying versus limiting, how the best leaders empower, get practical about what does empowerment look like. And then finally, how do the best organizations go about developing and multiplying leaders? All right, so the highest form of leadership, we believe that good leaders create followers. Followership is a key, it's the essence of leadership. You have to have followership to be a leader. Good leaders create followers, and great leaders create, you guessed it, leaders. So the question for us, just to kind of set the stage here, is before we go into that, the question for us is, why do we care, right? Why do we care? If we can get by with followers, if we can get by with people that are able to execute on things that we need to get done, why would we care about creating leaders? So I want you to think about that a little bit. I'm sure you have your own thoughts there. Let me give you what I think here. I think it's about, how do we go about really scaling impact? What does it mean to really try to scale our impact as a leader? And it's a legacy that we get to create as leaders when we build up and empower leaders around us. So if we really care about the mission that we're on, if we really care about the cause that we're about, the purpose that we're on, we're going to care about creating leaders that can carry the torch. And so if we care about the mission, we're going to care about creating leaders. And if we care about the people, so if we really care about the people around us, we know it's best for them. We want to help them grow. We want to help them develop. And I encourage you to think about this, not in terms of title, not in terms of a leader's title, but really in terms of equipping people and giving them autonomy, giving them ownership, and helping them show up as leaders regardless of what their title is. And we can all do this, no matter what our own titles are. We can all do this and focus on empowering leaders around us. Okay, I'm going to share a concept here. Actually, Luke, would you be able to pull up the first poll question? I want to ask you guys, the question is, as it's coming up here, have you ever been, there it is, have you ever been around a leader who made you feel small? A leader who made you feel less than? Think about that for yourself. It could be a coach, it could be a teacher, it could be a manager that you've worked with, but a leader who made you feel small or less than. So as you're thinking about that, and we can, well, we got a preponderance of evidence here. You can go ahead and share that poll whenever you're ready, Luke. That's resounding. So help me out in the chat. What are some things, just give me your thoughts. What are some things that leader did that made you feel small, that made you feel less than? Give me some ideas. Help me out in the chat. Gaslighting, says Hannah. And some of these may be going to panelists only. If you click panelists and attendees, everybody else will be able to see what you're saying. Talked down to me, condescending. Isn't that true? Talked over, did not listen. Shelly, that's a great one. And good to see you, Shelly. Talked over, discouraged innovative ideas. They took credit. They compared my credentials to the last person in that position. Wow. Manipulated, questioned your worth. This is so good. We can all think of these examples, right? And a lot of it comes down to, a lot of times I think what we find is that the leader in this situation could actually be insecure themselves. And one of the ways that they make themselves feel better is by making others less than. So we can experience that, right? I want to ask you the next question though, the converse of that. And if you can pull that one up now, Luke. Tell me about, have you been around a leader that made you actually feel more capable? They made you feel more confident, more empowered. They recognized the worth that you had. And when you're around them, you felt like you were more capable. This is also fairly resounding. We can share results whenever you're ready. So light up the chat. What about that leader made you feel this way? Made you feel more capable, more empowered? What did they do? What kind of behaviors did they have that drove that for you? This is good. Provided coaching rather than doing the work for me. That's really good. Autonomy. I love that, Hannah. Clarity of expectations. You guys are hitting on our content today. Have you guys seen these slides? Clear, attainable goals. They were encouraging. They believed in me. This is so good. Went out of their way to understand. Such good examples, right? So we're gonna talk about this, and we're gonna give you a framework really to be able to really bring this to life in your own leadership in an intentional way. So there's this concept of multipliers and limiters. There's a great book, by the way, by Liz Wiseman that you can read called Multipliers, and she does a phenomenal job. And really, limiters, leaders who limit, they end up hurting the company. They end up ultimately hurting the team, and they end up ultimately hurting themselves. They limit their own career potential by not pouring into the people around them and getting the most of the people around them. This is a tragic statistic. There's a lot of research that Liz Wiseman's done on this, and they find that limiters get less than half out of the potential value of their team. It's crazy. And imagine scaling that across an organization. And there's some things that we do that we don't even know are limiting others, but there's other things we can do that can actually pour into and multiply the intelligence, multiply the creativity, the innovation, the talent of the people around us. And that's what we're going to get into today. So we know what not to do. We can all think of examples of what not to do, but how do we know we're supposed to empower people. How do we go about empowering people around us? That's the big question. Empowerment is this big buzzword, right? We're going to try to make it a little bit more concrete, a little bit more real for us today. So how can we be a leader who creates empowered leaders? We've all heard about delegation, right? Leaders delegate. You're like, yes, Blake, I didn't need to come to this webinar to hear leaders delegate. We're going to go a little bit deeper on this. It's not just about delegation. We're going to focus on, if we want to create leaders, we're going to focus on delegating authority and not just tasks. Delegating authority and not just tasks. When you delegate tasks, you get followers. You get passive task doers typically. When you delegate tasks, you tell them exactly what to do and how to do it. You're really breeding and developing followers and task doers, right? On that contrast, when you delegate authority, that's when you're really getting and empowering leaders. You're giving them autonomy for, you're owning this, and you're the one that's going to figure out how to get this done. I'm going to trust you with that, and you're going to run with it. That's ultimately what will create leaders, is when we focus on not just delegation, but how can I, as much as possible, within the boundaries that I need to have proper boundaries, proper guidance, but I'm going to delegate as much authority as I can and not merely tasks. Okay, let's dive a little bit deeper. Let's talk more about empowerment. What does empowerment look like? I credit Craig Rochelle here, incredible leader. If you haven't listened to his podcast, it's amazing. But he talks about two currencies of empowerment. There's two currencies of empowerment. Those are clarity and trust. And I heard this actually in the chat with a lot of your all's submissions, clarity and trust, and they need to come hand in hand. So if you really want to empower people around you, you're going to bring clarity, you're going to provide clarity, you're going to extend trust, and they need to go hand in hand. I want you to think about a time, and maybe in your own leadership, where you were given clarity on something. So let's say that you were given a project and you were clear on what the expectations were, you were clear on what success looked like, you were clear on the importance of it, very clear on that. So were you given the clarity, but you weren't given trust. You weren't given full trust to own it. You felt like somebody was looking over your shoulder and be micromanaging. That produces a lot of fear, right? When you're given clarity, but you're not really given trust. On the converse, can you think of a time, I know I can, where you've been given trust, actually, you've been given full trust. You feel like, hey, you know what, Jenny, you're going to own this. You're going to run with this. You're going to own this project. But you haven't really been given the clarity. So you don't really know what success looks like. You don't know what, you don't feel like you really know what you need to do in order to succeed. You don't know the why behind it, what this whole thing is about. That also produces frustration. So if clarity without trust produces fear, trust without clarity produces frustration. When you bring these two together, trust and clarity, that produces faith. Faith from your leader in you, and faith in yourself, and you can actually get this done. So that's what true empowerment looks like. Remember these two currencies. If you really want to empower somebody, you're going to give them clarity and you're going to extend trust. When we're talking about clarity, we're going to focus most on the what and the why. So what does success look like, and why is this important? And we're, as much as possible, we're going to empower our people to figure out the how. We're going to leave an invitation for creativity, an invitation for innovation. And we're there to guide, of course. But if I had to ask you guys this question, we know that the number one reason why leaders actually fail to delegate authority is because they have an issue with trust. Can I really trust this person to own this and do a good job with it, right? That's one of our biggest limiters as leaders, and delegating authority is this issue of trust. So here's the big question. How do you know if you can trust somebody? How do you know if you can trust somebody? Think on that. You can put it in the chat if you have an idea. How do you know if you can trust somebody? And this is a little bit of a truism here. It's got a very simple answer. And that answer is you trust them. Shelley, you nailed it. You don't know until you try. So it's a truism. Leaders, and this is a big takeaway here, leaders, we extend trust. Part of our job as a leader is we are the ones who extend trust. And yes, if somebody has a track record of trust, they've built that track record. If they have a resume, but think of a person that you don't know that they don't have a track record yet in something, and you're giving them something new. You haven't worked with them before. They're on your team, and you need them to get something done. That the only way to know if you can trust them is to actually extend that trust. So that's what a great leader does, is they are proactive in extending trust. And a quick little practical tip here, when you're doing this, guys, be explicit that you're extending trust. Be explicit. Say, you know what? Given your skills, given your gifts and your background, I really think that you could do a great job with this responsibility. And I want to trust you with this. And I'm here for you. So for any guidance and support that you need, but I want to trust you with this. And what that does is it connotes, it's kind of sobering for the receiver. It connotes that, wow, I'm given ownership for something. I've been given trust for something. It helps motivate them. And it also tells you that there was no lack of clarity and expectations. And so if they prove untrustworthy, then you know, right? Then you can try to put them in a role maybe, or a position that you can trust them with. But as a leader, it's our job to make sure we have a team that we can trust. And it starts with extending trust. Okay, now we're going to get to this visual, right? I teed up this visual. Here's the main event, guys. This is the support challenge matrix. And it's had a huge impact on my leadership, and I want to share it with you guys. So the idea here is, notice the axes, right? We have low challenge to high challenge. We have low support to high support. Here's the quick spoiler. The best leaders are high in both. They're high support, they're high challenge. That's the spoiler. I'll tell you this too. 99.9% of leaders are not naturally high in both of these. That is, they have to work. They have to really be intentional and be aware of where they naturally gravitate. Most of us will naturally gravitate more towards one of these ends of the spectrum than the other. We might be naturally higher in challenge. We might be naturally higher in support. We have to work to get ourselves high in both. So we're going to talk through this and what it looks like, starting with the bottom right quadrant, a leader who's high challenge and they're low support. We call this a leader who dominates. So they're high in challenge. They're really good on the challenge part, right? But they're low in support. And we think of challenge, I want you to think of it this way. It's when we say that a leader is high challenge, is a leader who has high expectations. They want to stretch people. They're very clear. They don't shy away from hard conversations. They're very clear in expectations. They're very candid and direct in feedback. Think about that for a high challenge leader, right? Think about support. A supporting leader is one who is encouraging, one who is, you feel like they are there for you as a person, not just about the results, but they're there for you. They're there to coach you, guide you, help you when you need help. So this leader is one who is, they got the challenge part down. They're low in support. This leads to a dominating leader and leads to a stress culture. People feel afraid. They might feel manipulated with this kind of leader. They're really good at lighting a fire underneath somebody to get something done, but it's usually externally motivated. You can light that fire, get somebody to move, and then they sit back down and they're constantly lighting fires, gaslighting, as was said before in the chat. Okay, let's move around. So what about when you have low challenge, low support? As we're talking about these, I'm sure you can think of leaders that you've been around that might fall in these different quadrants. So low challenge, low support. We call this a leader who advocates, and it ultimately leads to a culture of apathy. And guys, unfortunately, there are so many managers that would fall into this camp where they aren't really there to challenge anyone, and they aren't really there to support. They're just trying to get by. And this, again, leads to a culture of apathy, and ultimately it's an abdication of leadership. This quadrant, this one is unfortunately near and dear to my heart. This is where I naturally fall. I am a naturally high support person. I'm very encouraging. I love getting people motivated and encouraging them and pouring into their gifts and strengths. Where I fail, though, I would say I'm maybe more naturally medium, because I do like to stretch people and help people grow. That's a big part of my nature as well. But where I really fail is I am really bad when it comes to, naturally, that is, I'm really bad when it comes to direct feedback and clear expectations. I never want to hurt anybody's feelings. I grew up in the South, and we sugarcoat things. That's the culture I grew up in, right? And if there was something that would offend someone or hurt their feelings, I didn't want to say it, and I wanted to hold back. This leads to what we call a cozy culture. And in a cozy culture, guess what's not present in a cozy culture? Growth. People aren't growing when they're too cozy, when they're too comfortable. Unfortunately, guys, like, we're big fans of servant leadership. We want everyone to be a servant leader. This is where a lot of servant leadership cultures can actually go wrong, because they end up being, we see this a lot with nonprofits and ministries and even churches. They end up being really high on the support, and they aren't high enough in challenge. And so they let things slide. They don't provide hard feedback. I realized very early on in my career that this was going to, number one, hurt people around me if I wasn't candid in my expectations and in my feedback. And number two, it would limit my own career growth. So I have to work, because my nature is to be in this camp. I have to work to move myself into this other camp, which we're going to call the empowering camp, the empower quadrant. And this is ultimately about creating a thriving culture. And this is marrying bringing high support and bringing high challenge. And another way to think about this is we call it a liberating leader. This is a leader who fights for your people's highest possible good. So if you're fighting for someone else's highest possible good, that means that you're going to support them where they need to be supported. You're going to encourage them. You're going to help them where they need help. And you're going to challenge them. You're going to stretch them. You're going to give them feedback that may not be comfortable, but it's going to help them grow. This is ultimately the quadrant that we want to be in. So what I want you to do, I want you to think about three contexts, right? Introspectively for yourself, three different contexts. One, professionally. Where would you fall on this matrix in your professional life? Which one is kind of your natural space, right? I've shared that for me, I'm in the protect quadrant for sure. Naturally, I have to fight to get over here into that empower quadrant. Two, I want you to think about it outside of work, your personal relationships. Where would you fall when you think of your significant other, your kids, maybe your best friends? Where would you fall on this matrix there? And then finally, the final context is think about it for yourself personally, your own self-talk, basically. Are you someone who's high challenge for yourself? Are you somebody who's really high support for yourself? For me, this is where I actually change quadrants. I naturally fall more into the dominate quadrant when it's my own self. I'm very hard on myself, don't have enough grace for myself typically, so I have to work to have more support for myself, right? Okay, so think about those three contexts. You're also, as you're thinking about that, I'm sure you're thinking, you know what? Yeah, I can think about it in those different contexts, but it does look different based on different relationships. And this is true too. So it actually varies by the individual that you're working with. So I want to give you an analogy. Take away this analogy, if you will. The Sherpa. I want you to channel your inner Sherpa. If you guys know, a Sherpa is someone who's native to the Himalayan regions. They guide people up Mount Everest. And Mount Everest, if you want to do any research on it, it's crazy. My mind has been blown the last few years and when I learned about Mount Everest. Number one, it costs like $100,000 to go up Mount Everest these days, which is insane. But it's super intense. A lot of people die trying to make this trek. And there's a couple of applications for us with the Sherpa analogy. One is that the Sherpa is not just telling people where to go. They're not just pointing and saying, hey, you're going to do this and you're going to do that. They're actually taking people up the mountain with them. They're elevating people with them. And that's the essence of a servant leader. Sometimes they're carrying their own baggage. They're carrying their gear with them, the Sherpa is. It's amazing. They're helping them elevate the mountain. What that means, though, is that the Sherpa has to be healthy themselves. I got this analogy from Jeremy Kubicek, and he was on my podcast. Incredibly wise guy. And he had a great line. He said, nobody wants to follow an asthmatic Sherpa. Can you imagine following an asthmatic Sherpa up Mount Everest? The same thing for us as leaders. We can't lead people to a place that we are not. That's why we focus on our own personal growth, our own health as leaders, because we can't give what we don't possess. That's the first analogy, first application. The second one, though, in this context is that Sherpas, what they're really good at is they get a new crop of people every few weeks or whatever it is, every couple of months, and they're taking them up. They have to quickly understand what makes that person tick. What is it that makes that person tick? They're great people readers, and they bring the right support, the right challenge that person needs. Some people need more of a kick in the pants, a harsh kind of challenge. Others may need more gentle prodding. But what a Sherpa is really good, as opposed to this dominating leader that lights the fire and needs somebody to get in the move, the Sherpa figures out how to light the fire inside of you. And then they calibrate, they bring the right level of challenge, the right level of support that keeps that fire internally motivated. So that's where we want to go as leaders. We want to be empowering in that way. You can screenshot this matrix if you want to let it stick with you. I hope this has an impact for you in the same way it has for me. Real quickly, I want to talk to you about so we talked about how leaders help grow leaders. How do organizations develop leaders? And this, you can think of it almost as a maturity model. On the y-axis here, we talk about connection and belonging. We think that you're winning at developing people when it becomes their favorite employee benefit. So they look at it like, well, my favorite thing about my company is the way that they help me grow and develop. And then the x-axis here is how successful you are at actually driving change, at driving the follow through. Level 1, companies may have an informal approach, book clubs, learning management systems. Level 2 may add in some ad hoc trainings, like radical candor, for example, would be a great training to have. Level 3, take it up a big notch, and they say, we're going to have cohort-based programs to have them go through some curriculum and maybe some rotations together. Really robust way to go about it. Level 4, though, is what we call leadership multiplication. And that's taking it up another level. And it's saying, how can we use our talent within our company to really sharpen and support and challenge, back to the support challenge piece? How can we use that inside our company to multiply our leaders? And so the best organizations are thinking, how can I multiply my top people in my organization? And they're figuring out how to build a culture around this concept of leadership multiplication. At CoThryve, we have a concept, we have a model called a growth group, and we take 10 participants and we lead them through a 12-month program. And the whole idea is tapping into the power of the peer group. You can do this within your company on your own. It's figuring out, how can I leverage my own talent inside my company and provide them a forum where they can support each other and they can challenge each other and they can really learn and grow together and sharpen each other together. So that's the bonus content. Now, I mentioned an opportunity for some key takeaways. If there was anything that struck you, I'd love to see in the chat. If you can put in the chat to panelists and attendees, what are 1 or 2 things for you that you'd like to take away to apply in your own leadership? 1 or 2 things from what we talked about that you'd like to take away and apply in your own leadership. You can light up the chat. Yes, the matrix itself. And I'll go back real quick while we're doing this in case anybody wants to screenshot this matrix if you didn't get a chance to. Don't just delegate tasks, delegate authority. Yes. Be explicit about extending the trust. Trust to trust. I love that. Empowering those around me. You can keep those coming. I want to thank you guys. Thank you guys for the opportunity. Thank you for being here today. I'd love to connect on LinkedIn. My challenge for you, take this matrix and teach it to somebody. One of the best ways to internalize something is to share it with someone else and then help them rate you on this matrix. And it can be transformational for relationships when you talk about, how can I support you better? How can I challenge you better? And also think about, how can you help your organization, your team, tap into the power of the peer group and multiply leaders inside your company. So I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn, and I'm available to connect by email as well.
That was amazing. Thank you, Blake. So many great insights. And you are right. It was a memorable session that I think is probably one of my most favorite so far this year. Thank you so much. Wonderful takeaways, great lessons. Thanks to all of our participants today. Please join us again for another Inspire series. We have a number of things coming up with Bridge Innovate. If you're in the Chattanooga region, we have a sneak peek coming up next week. On June the 23rd, come co-work at Bridge Innovate and help us refine our approach to sharing our amazing studio in the hybrid work environment for offices and co-working space. Come check us out on June 23rd. It's free. And we also have a webinar coming up on the value proposition canvas, a great tool from Strategizer that we use in a lot of our work, coming up on July 14th. And then a special guest, Dave Hopman from Kinco, Chief Commercial Officer there, August 11th, around the power of the customer experience. And then, of course, our Foresight Scouts program coming up in August. So thanks, everyone, for joining today. We hope to see you again on another Inspire series program. And thank you, Blake.
Thank you, guys.
Bye now.